The manager's hand was already on the phone before he finished saying it. Security, now. The woman standing at the front desk of the Clarendon Club did not move. She kept both hands visible on the marble counter. Her coat was damp at the shoulders from the November rain. She had driven 4 hours from Ottawa in that rain, and she had 3 minutes before her name was called in the dining room upstairs, and she was standing here because the man behind the desk had looked at her face and decided she did not belong. His name was Renaud, 41 years old, third-generation Clarendon family member. His grandfather had accepted the first membership application in 1962. He had been managing the front desk personally tonight because it was the annual Governor-General's Gala, and Renaud believed, with the kind of conviction that never gets examined out loud, that some events required a certain standard of presence. She had walked in at 6:47 p.m. in a navy wool coat, good leather boots, and a small silver pin at her lapel that Renaud had not looked at closely enough to recognize. He had looked at everything else. Her name was Yolanda Ferris. She was 34 years old. She had grown up in Timmins, Ontario, in a 2-bedroom house where her mother worked the overnight shift at a mining camp dispatch office, and her father played guitar at a Pentecostal church every Sunday and fixed boilers the other 6 days. She had attended Laurentian University on a science scholarship, then the University of Toronto for her graduate degree, then the National Research Council of Canada, where she had worked for 8 years in silence that was not modesty but focus. She was not famous. She had never wanted to be. The kind of work she did not make you famous. It made you the person that other more visible people called when the thing they were building kept failing. Tonight she had been invited to dinner by the Governor-General's office to receive the Symons Medal for scientific contribution. It was not a small thing. 17 people had received it in 30 years. 2 of them had later won the Nobel. She did not know anyone at the Clarendon Club. She had never been here before. She had taken the train to Montreal, then a car, and arrived in the rain at a door she had been told would be expecting her. Renaud had not been expecting her, not in any way that mattered. He had looked up from the reservation terminal when she pushed through the brass door. He had taken in the wet coat, the natural hair, the absence of jewelry beyond the small silver pin. He had waited for her to identify herself as staff, as a delivery person, as someone's +1 who had wandered in from the cold. She had said clearly, "Yolanda Ferris, I'm a guest this evening, the Governor-General's table." Renaud had not moved. His eyes traveled to the terminal, not to look her up, but to let her know he was in no particular hurry on her behalf. He said, "Do you have documentation, an invitation card?" She said, "I received a digital confirmation. I can pull up the email." "We require the physical card at the door for gala events." She looked at him steadily. "I wasn't sent a physical card. I can show you the email, the confirmation number, and a government-issued ID." "That's not the procedure." "Then I'd like to speak to whoever can verify my name on the guest list." That was when his hand had gone to the phone. The security guard who arrived was a young man named Pascal, 22 years old and 6 weeks out of a community college program. He had not expected to do anything significant tonight. He was supposed to stand near the coat check and watch for unattended bags. He came through the side door now and looked at the woman at the desk, then at Renaud, then at the woman again. Something in the triangle made him uncomfortable in a way he couldn't quite name. Renaud said without looking at Pascal, "Please escort this woman outside." Pascal did not move immediately. He said, "Has she done something?" "She doesn't have the documentation for entry." Pascal looked at the woman. She had her phone out. On the screen, clearly visible even from where he stood, was a confirmation email with the Governor-General of Canada's official letterhead at the top, a QR code below it, and the name Ferris Y in block capitals. She turned the screen toward Renaud. "This is my invitation. There is a confirmation number. There is a QR code. You can scan it." Renaud said, "Our scanner is for approved documents only." "That is the document." "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step outside while we verify." "I would like you to verify me right now. My name is on your list. You haven't checked your list." "We have a process." "Your process," she said, "has been standing here for 4 minutes deciding I don't look like a guest. I would like you to look at your guest list. I am asking you to do that one thing." Renaud picked up the desk phone, not the one that called security, the one that called the dining room upstairs. He was calling the event coordinator, a woman named Denise, 48 years old, who had worked the Governor-General's events for 11 years and had personally typed the seating chart that morning. Denise answered on the second ring. Renaud said, in the voice of a man managing an inconvenience, "We have a woman at the front claiming to be on the GG list. Says she doesn't have the physical card. Can you check a Ferris?" A pause, a keyboard. Then Denise said, "Yolanda Ferris. Yes, she's at table 1. She's receiving the Symons Medal tonight. She should have been at the door 20 minutes ago. I've been wondering where she was." Renaud said nothing for 2 seconds. He set the phone down. He turned to Yolanda. His expression did not change. "There seems to have been a miscommunication about the physical card requirement. If you'll follow me." "I'd like a moment," she said. He stopped. She did not look at him. She was looking at Pascal. "What's your name?" Pascal blinked. Pascal, have you been recording this on your body cam?" Pascal glanced down. The small camera clipped to his chest had been running since he stepped out of the coat check room. Its light was green. "Yes," he said. She nodded once. She looked back at Renaud. "Thank you for finally checking the list." She walked past him toward the elevator. She did not hurry. She had been a scientist for 12 years, and she understood, more than most people, that you do not disturb the evidence by running from it. The dining room on the 4th floor of the Clarendon Club was exactly the kind of room that made people feel the weight of their own smallness and the significance of the occasion at the same time. White linen, crystal. Candles that were not for atmosphere but for tradition. 28 people at 4 tables. The Governor-General herself at table 1, 61 years old, silver-haired, former Chief Justice of Ontario, a woman who had spent 40 years in rooms where the wrong word cost somebody their future. Her name was Adrienne Leclerc. She had met Yolanda Ferris once before, 4 years ago, at a research symposium in Winnipeg. She remembered the conversation because it had been the only one at the symposium that she had not been able to finish. Not because it was unpleasant, but because it was still going when her car arrived, and she had thought about it on the flight home. When Yolanda entered the dining room at 6:54 p.m., Leclerc stood. Not because protocol required it, because she was the kind of woman who stood. "Dr. Ferris, I was beginning to worry." Yolanda took her seat. She folded her napkin in her lap. She said quietly enough that only Leclerc could hear it, "There was a situation at the front desk." Leclerc looked at her. Yolanda said, "I'll explain later." She did not explain it later, at dinner. She ate the meal. She answered questions about her research with the kind of clarity that made complicated things feel inevitable, the way good science always does when you are close enough to it to see the shape of it. She accepted the Symons Medal after the 3rd course, from Leclerc's hands, in front of 27 people who were all on their feet. She held the medal and she said 3 sentences. "This belongs to everyone who told me I was in the wrong field. I kept the rejection letters. There are 41 of them." 2 people laughed. The rest went quiet in the way that means something landed. She sat back down. She ate the dessert. She made a joke to the woman on her left about the traffic on the Champlain Bridge. She was present and warm and entirely, completely herself. And underneath all of it, in the part of her that had been a child in Timmins, counting her mother's overtime slips on the kitchen table, she was also doing what her mother had taught her to do in situations like this one. She was remembering every detail. Pascal, in the meantime, had gone back to the coat check room and stood there for a long time looking at the body cam footage on the small review screen. He had seen Renaud at the desk before. He had seen the way Renaud managed the door on event nights, who got waved through and who got stopped and how long each stopping took. He had been 6 weeks on this job. He had told himself he did not have enough standing to say anything about what he observed. He was 22 years old, and he had grown up in Laval in a family where his father worked 2 jobs and his older brother had spent 3 months in pre-trial detention for something that was ultimately stayed. He knew what it looked like when someone decided who you were before you spoke. He had been on the other side of that counter his whole life. He rewound the footage to the beginning. He watched Yolanda walk in. He watched Renaud's face in the 3 seconds before she spoke. He watched himself arrive and stand in the wrong place for too long. He plugged the camera into his personal phone and sent the file to his personal email, and then sat with that decision for 15 minutes, because he understood that the next thing he did would say something permanent about who he was. At 9:22 p.m., Yolanda came down from the dining room. Her coat was dry now. She had the medal in its box in her left hand. She walked to the front desk where Renaud was still standing because Renaud always stood at the front desk at the end of the gala to see members out. It was the part of the evening he liked best. He did not know what to do with his face when he saw her. She stopped in front of him. She did not raise her voice. She said, "I'd like the name of the club's general manager and the contact for your board of directors." Renaud said, "Is there a concern I can help you with?" "You can give me the contact information." "I'd be happy to take a note and have someone follow up with you in the morning." "I'm not asking you to take a note. I'm asking for the contact information." Renaud began to say something about after-hours protocol. He did not finish the sentence because Pascal had come out of the coat check room and was standing 3 feet away, and in his hand was a piece of paper with 2 email addresses and a phone number that he had looked up from the club's own website, which was public, and he held it out toward Yolanda without looking at Renaud at all. She took the paper. She looked at Pascal. She said, "Thank you." He said, "I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner." She looked at him for a moment. "You're saying something now." She walked out through the brass door into the Montreal night. She did not call her lawyer that night. She called her mother first. She told her she had gotten the medal. Her mother made a sound that was not a word, the kind of sound you make when you have been hoping for something so long that when it arrives, your voice doesn't know what shape to take. Then Yolanda told her about the front desk. Her mother was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "You got the medal anyway." "I did." "Good. Now call Vanessa." Vanessa Osimensa was 39 years old, a civil litigation partner at a firm in Ottawa that handled human rights cases, and won them at a rate that had made other firms uneasy for a decade. She had gone to law school with Yolanda. They had studied at the same table in the Robarts Library for 2 years and had not spoken because they were both the kind of people who go to the library to work. Then one night at 2 a.m., during exam period, a third person had sat down between them and eaten an egg salad sandwich loudly. And they had both looked up at the same moment. And something in the shared suffering had started a friendship that had lasted 12 years. Vanessa answered on the first ring. Yolanda gave her the details in the order they had happened, the way she always organized information, not by importance but by sequence, because sequence was how you found cause. Vanessa said, "You have body cam footage?" The security guard confirmed it was running from the moment he arrived. "And the event coordinator's call is on the club's own phone system." "Locked." Vanessa said, "Okay." Then she said, "Yolanda, the medal." "I know." "Tell me what it looked like." So she told her. The room, the candles, Adrian Leclerc standing before protocol required it, the 3 sentences, the 41 rejection letters, and Vanessa, who had known her since the egg salad sandwich incident at 2 a.m. in a library, sat on the other end of the phone and did not say anything for a while, and that silence was its own kind of answer. The formal complaint was filed with the Quebec Human Rights Commission 7 days later. Vanessa filed it in 3 languages. The body cam footage, which Pascal had preserved and turned over voluntarily with a signed statement, was attached as Exhibit A. The event coordinator's phone log was subpoenaed and confirmed Renaud had called her at 6:51 p.m., 4 minutes after Yolanda's arrival, without once consulting the digital guest list on the desk terminal, which had been active and visible the entire time. The Clarendon Club retained a lawyer. The lawyer made the kind of statements lawyers make in the first 2 weeks of a case when they believe the other side will accept something quiet. Vanessa did not accept something quiet. The Montreal Gazette ran the story on a Thursday. The Globe and Mail picked it up by Friday afternoon. By Saturday, it was on the CBC, and the headline used the words Governor General's Gala, Symons Medal, and racial profiling in the same sentence, and the club's membership inquiry line went unanswered for most of the weekend. Governor General Leclerc did not issue a statement. She made a phone call to the chair of the Clarendon Club's board of directors, a woman she had known for 30 years through the Bar Association. The call lasted 11 minutes. Leclerc did not shout. She did not threaten. She simply described, in the precise language of a former Chief Justice, what she had observed when Yolanda walked into the dining room 4 minutes late with damp shoulders and a composure that should not have been necessary. She said, "If the club handles this the way it handled the front desk, I will not be returning." The chair of the board called an emergency session 3 days later. Renaud was placed on administrative leave before the week was out. He was not given a public statement. He was called into an office and told that his employment was under review and that he should not contact any member of the event staff. He sat in that office and said the same thing 3 times in 3 different ways. He had been following procedure. He had been protecting the event. He had made a judgment call in an uncertain situation. The chair of the board, a 64-year-old woman named Bernadette, who had grown up in Chicoutimi and had been the first woman admitted to her law firm and the second to make partner, and who understood, at a cellular level, what it cost a person to walk into a room that did not expect them, looked at Renaud and said, the uncertain part was never the situation. The uncertain part was her. Renaud said nothing. Go home, Gerard. Pascal gave testimony to the commission in January. He had by then left the Clarendon Club and accepted a position with a community legal clinic in Laval that did intake for human rights complaints. The director of the clinic had called him after the story ran and said, I saw what you did. We could use someone who does that. He had started 2 weeks later. He made less money. He slept better. He sat in the commission hearing room and answered questions for 40 minutes. He did not embellish. He said what he saw, in the order he saw it, including the part where he stood in the wrong place for too long, and the part where he knew he had the footage, and sat with it for 15 minutes before he decided. The commission adjudicator asked him why he had preserved the footage. He said, because I grew up watching people not preserve it, and I didn't want to be one more of those people. The Clarendon Club settled with Yolanda Ferris 14 months after the gala. The terms were not made public at Yolanda's request. What was made public, because it was filed as part of the settlement agreement, was a list of structural changes the club agreed to implement. Mandatory equity training for all client-facing staff, a revised door policy for ticketed events that defaulted to digital verification, an anonymous reporting process for members and guests, and an annual review of the process conducted by an external auditor. A sentence at the bottom of the agreement noted that the settlement funds had been directed at the recipient's discretion to the Timmins Public Library Foundation and to a scholarship in applied sciences at Laurentian University. Yolanda told 2 people about the scholarship, her mother and Vanessa. Her mother cried. Vanessa said, I'm naming a wing of my office after you one day. Yolanda told her she would hold her to it. She was back in her lab in Ottawa the Monday after the settlement was announced. Her research associate, a young man named Felix who was 26 and had joined the team 8 months ago, and who had not yet learned to disguise his admiration, said, Dr. Ferris, it's everywhere. The settlement. Everyone's talking about it. She said, I know. She hung her coat and sat down and opened her laptop. Make sure the spectrometer calibration ran over the weekend. Felix went to check the spectrometer. She sat for a moment before she opened her files. Through the window above her desk, the Ottawa sky was gray and low and the kind of cold that settles into stone. She thought about the brass door at the Clarendon Club. She thought about the way Renaud had reached for his phone before he reached for the guest list. She thought about Pascal standing in the coat check room with the footage and the 15 minutes of deciding. She had been asked, twice in interviews she had given, whether she was angry. The honest answer was that anger had not been the primary thing. The primary thing, standing at that counter in the rain while Renaud looked through her, had been a very old and very familiar tiredness, the tiredness of having walked into rooms her whole life that had not yet adjusted their expectations to include her. The tiredness of being excellent in a way that should have been unnecessary, of having to carry proof of herself everywhere she went. The second honest thing was that she had carried it anyway. She had carried it into the dining room and accepted a medal in front of people who finally saw what she had been building for 12 years. And that was worth something. That was not nothing. But she had also meant what she said at the microphone. Her uniform, the medal, the government letterhead, the Governor General's table, none of it should have been required to get through a door she had been invited through. The next scientist, the next student from Timmins, the next person walking in from the rain, should not have to be a medal recipient to be let inside. That was the part she wanted people to hold on to, not her name, not the settlement, that. She opened her files, she got back to work. A year after the gala, the Clarendon Club's annual report noted, without commentary, that the complaints filed through its new anonymous reporting process had resulted in 3 reviews and 2 internal policy clarifications in its first year of operation. The report did not mention what the reviews had found. It did not mention Yolanda Ferris. It mentioned the gala only in the context of ticket revenue. In Timmins, the public library added a new reading room with a small plaque by the door that listed the donors. One of the names was Ferris Y. The librarian who ordered the plaque had never heard the full story. She had simply received the donation form and done her job. The plaque went up on a February morning when the temperature was -22, and the parking lot was empty, and the only person in the building was a 14-year-old girl who came every day after school and sat in the corner with a stack of books about chemistry and did not look up until closing time. The girl did not see the plaque that morning. She would see it later, in a different February, in a different year, when she came back to the library as someone who had been somewhere and made something and needed, for reasons she could not entirely explain, to return to the place where it had started. She would stand in front of the plaque for a long time. She would not know who Yolanda Ferris was. She would look up the name later that evening on her phone in the warmth of her bedroom, and she would read for an hour, and at the end of the hour she would set the phone down and look at the ceiling and feel, for reasons she also could not entirely explain, like someone had left a door open for her. It was not a famous door, it was not on a street anyone would recognize, but it was open, and that, for a 14-year-old girl in Timmins in February, was the whole thing. There's a moment in this story that I keep coming back to. Not the medal, not the settlement. It's Pascal, alone in the coat check room, body cam footage on the small review screen, 15 minutes of sitting with a decision that nobody was watching him make. That's the moment everything turned on. Not Yolanda's credentials, not the Governor General standing up before protocol required it. Pascal, 22 years old, in a room by himself, deciding what kind of person he was going to be before anyone could reward or punish him for it. I think about that a lot. The choices that happen when no one's keeping score. What Renaud did at that front desk wasn't complicated. He looked at a woman walking in from the rain and decided, in 3 seconds, that she didn't belong. He never checked the list. He never scanned the code. He reached for the phone before he reached for the facts. And the thing about that kind of thinking is it doesn't feel like a decision when you're inside it. It feels like instinct. It feels like procedure. It feels like just doing your job. That's what makes it so corrosive. It's invisible to the person doing it, even when it's completely visible to everyone else in the room. Yolanda knew. She had known her whole life. 41 rejection letters. Years of walking into rooms that hadn't adjusted their expectations to include her. She could have made a scene. She could have collapsed under the weight of it. Instead, she stood at that counter with wet shoulders and gave the man behind it exactly what he deserved. The calm of someone who has been here before and knows, with absolute clarity, that she is not the problem. That's not a small thing. That takes years to build. It takes the kind of intelligence that doesn't just sit in your head but runs all the way down into your spine, the understanding that your worth doesn't require the other person to see it in order to exist. Yolanda had built that. Not because the world made it easy, but because she chose it, over and over, in all the ordinary moments that led to that front desk. And Pascal. He sat with the footage for 15 minutes. He felt the weight of what it would cost him to hand it over. His job, his easy exit, his ability to pretend he hadn't seen what he'd seen. He handed it over anyway. That is not a small thing either. That is the thing. The whole point of having a conscience is that it operates whether or not the outcome benefits you. Pascal's did. At 22 years old, in Laval, with nothing to gain and a reasonable amount to lose, his did. I think we tell ourselves the same comfortable lie that Renaud probably told himself for years, that the small moments don't define us. That one look, one phone call, one decision to reach for the phone before reaching for the list, it's not who we really are. It's just a bad day, a judgment call, a misread situation. But that's not how it works. The small moments are exactly where character lives. Not the big ones where everyone's watching and the stakes are obvious. The small ones, the ones in coat check rooms, the ones at front desks when the room is quiet and nobody's recording yet. Yolanda knew that. She had been proving it her whole career. She walked out through the brass door that night and called her mother before she called her lawyer. That tells you everything. The door opened eventually. That's the part that matters. But the part I want to hold on to is this. It opened because 3 people in that building chose something, each in their own way, when it wasn't easy. That's the whole story. The rest is just what followed.